What's up, everyone? Today I got two short stories for you. One is legit and the other is a lie. The Last Trail. This story takes place in the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. Ethan Wilder was not a reckless man. At 52 years old, he had learned the difference between courage and carelessness, and he wore that understanding like a second skin. The wilderness to him was not something to be conquered, but something to be listened to and respected. That Saturday morning, the clear blue sky above Colorado's San Juan Mountains stretched endlessly, and the air felt thin and clean in his lungs. It was the kind of morning that made a man believe in the possibility of disappearing from the noise of everyday life. He had driven up before sunrise, his old truck rattling along the gravel road that led to the trailhead. There were only two other vehicles parked there when he arrived, both coated in dust, their occupants already somewhere deep in the wilderness. Ethan preferred it that way. Crowds belong to cities, not to places like this, where the wind spoke louder than the people ever could. He stepped out, stretched his stiff back, and took a long breath, letting the cold air wake him fully. He signed the trail register at 8:14 a.m., taking his time with the pen as if the act itself mattered more than it actually did. He wrote his name and that he was traveling solo. For his destination, he put High Creek Overlook. His handwriting was steady and deliberate, the kind of script that suggested a man who didn't rush decisions. The trail description had said, 11 miles, moderate difficulty. A comfortable challenge, something to remind his body it was still capable and still alive. The first stretch of the trail wound gently upward, cutting through open patches of shrubs and rock before slipping into the shade of tall pines. Ethan found his rhythm quickly, boots crunching against the dirt and gravel, hiking poles tapping in a steady cadence. His breath settled into a pattern, slow and controlled, matching the rise and fall of the terrain. Every so often he paused, not out of exhaustion, but to take it all in. The way sunlight filtered through the branches, the distant call of birds, and the quiet hum of insects in the undergrowth. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed higher, warming the ground and filling the air with the scent of pine resin and dry earth. Ethan passed a narrow stream that trickled over smooth stones. It sounded almost too gentle for the rugged landscape. He crouched there for a moment, splashing the cool water onto his face, letting it drip down his neck. It felt good, refreshing in a way that reached deeper than the surface. He checked his watch around noon and estimated he had covered roughly 6 miles. The trail began to narrow as it pushed deeper into the forest, the trees growing thicker, their branches knitting together overhead. Shadows stretched longer here, darker, and the temperature dropped just enough for him to notice. Still, nothing about it seemed unusual, just another shift in terrain, another mood of the mountain. Eventually, the path opened into a clearing, sudden and bright after the dim corridor of the trees. Wildflowers spread across the ground in scattered clusters, their colors vivid against the muted greens and browns. They swayed gently in the breeze, like tiny flags marking a territory that belonged to no one. Ethan stepped into the sunlight and felt it warm his face, his shoulders loosening as he took it all in. He set his backpack down and reached for his phone, holding it carefully to capture the scene. The picture wouldn't do it justice, he knew that, but it was just enough to share a piece of the moment. His daughter would like it. She always told him to send more photos. Ethan smiled faintly at the thought and snapped the shot, slipping the phone back into his pocket. For a while, he simply stood there, breathing in the scent of the flowers, letting the quiet settle around him. It was the kind of silence that felt earned, not empty, and he savored it. When he finally picked up his backpack and continued on, he felt lighter somehow, as if he had shed something unseen along the way. The first sign came subtly. The chatter of the birds, which had been constant until then, faded into nothing. The breeze, once gentle and cooling, seemed to stall, leaving the air strangely still. Ethan slowed his pace, his senses sharpening without him knowing it. There was no sound, no movement, just a quiet that felt heavier than it should. He stopped completely, turning his head slightly as he listened. It wasn't fear exactly, not yet, but something close to it, a tightening in his chest, a quiet warning that rose from somewhere deep. He had spent enough time outdoors to know that silence can mean many things, and not all of them were harmless. For a moment, he considered turning back, but the thought passed as quickly as it came. Then he saw the tracks. They were pressed into the dusty path ahead of him, large and distinct. Ethan crouched down, studying them closely, his fingers hovering just above the edges without quite touching. He didn't need to be an expert to recognize what he was looking at. He knew it was a cat. He straightened slowly, his eyes drifting toward the tree line. The forest seemed unchanged at first glance, still, quiet, deceptively ordinary. But now that he had seen the tracks, everything felt different, charged with the tension that hadn't been there before. He adjusted the straps of his backpack, pulling them tighter against his shoulders, and resumed walking, though his pace was now slower. Every few steps, he glanced behind him, then back ahead, scanning the shadows between the trees. His heartbeat picked up, not enough to panic him, but enough to remind him that he was no longer alone. He told himself what he had always believed. Mountain lions rarely attack humans. They avoid people and keep their distance. They gracefully move through the wilderness like ghosts. Except this time, the ghost revealed itself. At first, it was just a shape, something that didn't quite belong among the other patterns of light and shadow. Then it moved, stepping forward just enough for the sunlight to catch its tan coat. Its body low to the ground, its muscles shifting beneath its skin as it moved, its tail curved behind it, slow and deliberate, as if it had all the time in the world. Ethan froze and the animal's eyes locked onto him, yellow and unblinking, holding him in place more effectively than any physical restraint. There was no confusion in that gaze, no hesitation, only focus. The distance between them couldn't have been more than 20 yards. Close enough for Ethan to see the subtle rise and fall of its chest as it was breathing. His mind scrambled, pulling up fragments of advice he had heard over the years. Make yourself look bigger. Don't run. Maintain eye contact. Yell firmly. He forced his arms upward, spreading them wide, and took a step forward despite every instinct telling him not to. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice cracking into thin air. "Get out of here!" The words felt small as soon as they left his mouth, swallowed by the vastness around him. The lion didn't react the way he had hoped. It didn't retreat or even hesitate. Instead, it stepped forward, slow and fluid, its head dipping slightly, ears flattening back against its skull. A low hiss escaped from its mouth, soft but unmistakable. Ethan's throat went dry. He could feel the tremor in his arms, the way his muscles strained to hold his posture. He took a careful step backward, then another, never breaking eye contact. The ground beneath his boots felt uneven now, uncertain as if it might give away at any moment. The lion moved again, closing the distance with frightening ease. Every motion it made was controlled and precise. It wasn't rushing, wasn't wasting energy. It didn't need to. The balance of power was already clear. Ethan's grip tightened on his hiking poles, though he knew they offered little protection. Another rule surfaced in his mind, one he had never truly believed he would need. If it attacks, fight and go for the eyes. The lion sprang. It was not a leap so much as an explosion. A sudden release of coiled energy that covered the distance between them in an instant. Ethan barely had time to react, his body jerking backward as he tried to brace himself. The impact hit him like a falling weight, driving him to the ground with brutal force. His hiking poles flew from his hands and hit the ground. The air was knocked from his lungs, leaving him gasping, disoriented, as claws hooked into him, anchoring him in place. Pain followed a heartbeat later, sharp and overwhelming, blooming across his shoulder as its teeth sank into his flesh. He let out the loudest scream of his life. The sound tore from him, raw and unfiltered, echoing through the trees before dissolving into the silence that had returned just as suddenly. He hit the animal with everything he had, fists pounding, fingers clawing at its face. For a moment, just a moment, the lion shifted as it adjusted its grip. Ethan twisted, trying to roll to break free, but the movement only seemed to provoke it further. Its weight bore down on him again, heavier, more certain, pinning him against the ground. Ethan was going through sensory overload as he felt the rough texture of the dirt beneath his back, the smell of the animal, the sound of his own desperate breathing struggling against the crushing pressure in his chest. Then the pain flared again, more intense this time, spreading outward from the bite. He kept fighting, even as his strength began to falter. It was instinct more than anything else, a refusal to simply give in. His movements grew weaker, slower, his strikes losing their force. The lion was relentless and adjusted its hold, its jaws tightening with a final grip. Ethan's vision blurred as he stared up at the sky, the blue fading at the edges. His body, once so determined, began to betray him, the fight draining away in increments too small to notice until they were gone. The sounds around him dull as if they were sinking beneath the surface of something deep and dark. And then there was nothing. Hours passed before anyone came near that stretch of trail again. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the forest floor. When the hikers arrived, they noticed the disturbance immediately. The scuffed earth, the broken poles, the dark stains that marked the ground. They could tell immediately that something bad happened to someone. They called out, their voices uneasy, but no answer came. Following the signs felt wrong, like stepping into a story that wasn't meant for them. The drag marks led off the trail, disappearing into the trees where the light struggled to reach. They hesitated at the edge, exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. Once the hikers got back to their vehicle, they notified authorities about the incident. The police were able to identify the missing person from their vehicle information that was at the entrance to the trail. A search and rescue team was established, but they were unable to locate the missing hiker. Tight fit. This story takes place just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. John Jones was not the kind of man who chased danger for the thrill of it. In November, he joined a group of friends and family for what was meant to be a simple adventure, an exploration of a cave, a place known more for curiosity than catastrophe. It's set roughly 55 miles from Salt Lake City, tucked beneath the Utah landscape, unassuming and deceptively welcoming. The cave had earned a reputation as a beginner-friendly destination. Its winding passages and open chambers made it popular among amateur spelunkers and families looking for something different. That weekend, laughter echoed through its entrance as a group prepared to descend. John was accompanied by his brother Josh, who had far more experience navigating tight underground spaces. The plan was simple: split into smaller groups, allowing less experience to explore easier paths, while the more seasoned members ventured deeper. At first, everything unfolded exactly as expected. The cave air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of earth and minerals. Flashlights danced across limestone walls, illuminating textures carved by centuries of water and time. Voices carried through the tunnels, occasionally fading and returning as the group spread out. For John, it was just a rare chance to step away from daily life, to feel the quiet thrill of exploration in a place untouched by sunlight. As the group progressed, John and Josh moved towards a more challenging terrain. They spoke about a narrow passage known among explorers as the Birth Canal, a tight squeeze that tested both patience and composure. It was considered a rite of passage for many who visited the cave, a space that required careful maneuvering but promised a sense of accomplishment on the other side. John was curious and determined, so he decided to seek it out. Somewhere along the twisting network of tunnels, he took a wrong turn. It was an easy mistake in a cave where passages could look nearly identical. Instead of the known route, John found himself facing a different opening, a crack in the rock that seemed to lead somewhere promising. It was narrow, but not impossibly so, and he believed it would widen to a larger chamber beyond. With cautious optimism, he began to work his way inside. The space quickly tightened around him, the rock pressed against his shoulders, his chest, his hips, forcing him to inch forward with deliberate movements. At one point, he exhaled deeply to compress his body enough to slide through. For a moment, it worked, but when he tried to breathe normally again, his chest expanded against unyielding stone. The realization came suddenly and without mercy. He was stuck. The crevice measured only about 10 inches across and 18 inches high. For a man over 6 feet tall and weighing around 200 pounds, it was an unforgiving trap. John attempted to shift his weight to reverse his position, but the more he moved, the more firmly the cave held him. Panic flickered at the edges of his mind, but he fought to stay calm. He called out for Josh. Josh reached him quickly, his voice echoing with concern as he assessed the situation. Seeing only John's legs protruding from the narrow passage, he immediately tried to help. Gripping his brother's ankles, Josh pulled carefully at first, then with more urgency, but the effort only drove John deeper. The movement caused his body to rotate further into the crevice, leaving him inverted. His head was down, feet up, pinned in a position that made breathing increasingly difficult. Blood began to rush towards John's head as gravity worked against him. His arms were trapped beneath his chest, limiting his ability to push or adjust. Every breath required effort, each inhale shallower than the last. Josh realized with growing dread that he could not free his brother alone. In that moment of desperation, he paused and offered a prayer, his voice trembling in the confined darkness. Josh knew he had to act quickly. Leaving his brother behind, even temporarily, was unthinkable. But it was the only chance to bring him back help. He began the long journey out, navigating over 400 feet of narrow passages and uneven terrain, driven by urgency and hope. Hours passed before the first rescuer arrived, which was Susie. She carefully made her way through the cave, guided by Josh and the growing sense of urgency among the team. When she finally reached John, only his shoes were visible at first. The rest of his body was swallowed by the rock. She called out to him, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Hi, Susie. Thanks for coming," John said, his voice strained but clear. "But I really want to get out." His words were simple, almost understated, but they carried a depth of fear and longing that resonated with everyone who heard them. Susie reassured him, explaining that more rescuers were on their way. She began assessing the situation, but it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary rescue. The position John was in made even the simplest actions incredibly difficult. Over the next 24 hours, nearly 100 rescuers would take part in the effort. They came equipped with ropes, pulleys, and determination, each one aware of the risk involved. The cave's narrow passages made transporting equipment a challenge in itself. Every movement required careful coordination, and progress was slow. The environment was unforgiving, offering no room for error. One rescuer described John's location as the worst spot in the cave. The angle, the tightness, the inversion, all of it combined to create nearly impossible scenario. Yet the team pressed on, driven by the hope that they could still bring him out alive. At one point, they managed to reach far enough to hold his hand, a small but powerful gesture that reminded John he was not alone. Time became both an enemy and a motivator. As hours passed, the physical strain on John's body intensified. Being upside down placed enormous pressure on his heart and lungs. His breathing grew more labored, his voice weaker. Still, he spoke with rescuers, answering questions, following instructions, holding on to hope. After nearly 19 hours, the team devised a plan. Using a complex pulley system, they aimed to gradually pull John back through the crevice. It was a delicate operation, requiring precise coordination and careful application of force. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to lift him. For a moment, it seemed to be working. John felt himself shift slightly, a small but significant movement. Encouragement spread throughout the team. They believed they were close, that the plan might succeed. But in an instant, everything changed. A critical anchor point failed, causing the system to collapse. The tension released violently, and John was sent sliding back into his original position. The setback was devastating. Any progress they had made was undone in seconds. Worse still, the failure injured one of the rescuers when a piece of equipment snapped back and struck him. Amid his own suffering, John's concern turned outward. "Is he okay?" he asked weakly. Even in that moment, with his own life slipping away, John's thoughts were with someone else. It was a reflection of who he was, a man defined by compassion and selflessness. The rescuers, shaken but determined, continued their efforts, though the challenges seemed to mount with every passing hour. As exhaustion and stress took their toll, John began to panic. His breathing became more erratic, his words less steady. In an effort to calm him, rescuers arranged for his wife to speak with him by phone. Her voice, filled with love and reassurance, reached him in the darkness. She reminded him of their life together, of their children, of everything waiting for him at home. John clung to her words, promising he would come back, that he would not give up. For a brief moment, hope flickered again. But the human body has limits. After approximately 25 hours trapped in a cave, John's strength began to fade. The strain on his heart and lungs became too much. His responses grew slower, then stopped altogether. When a doctor finally reached him, there was little that could be done. John was pronounced dead, the result of cardiac arrest and suffocation. The silence that followed was heavy and profound. The rescuers, many of whom had spent hours risking their own lives, were left with the painful reality that they had done everything they could. The cave, once a place of exploration and wonder, had become a site of tragedy. In the days that followed, discussions turned to recovery efforts. John's wife expressed her wish to have her husband's body brought home, but the dangers that had claimed John's life remained. The conditions within the cave made further attempts too risky. Ultimately, the decision was made to seal the passage with controlled explosives. John's final resting place would remain within the cave. Today, the cave stands closed, its entrance sealed as both a precaution and a memorial. A plaque bearing John's name serves as a reminder of what happened there. Visitors no longer enter its depths, but the story of that day continues to resonate. So in this episode, we had The Last Trail and Tight Fit. Which one is legit and which one is a lie? The legit one was Tight Fit. This story took place in November of 2009. John Jones was exploring Nutty Putty Cave with a group of friends and family. John and 3 others had broken off into a separate group in search of the birth canal, which was a tight passageway with a turnaround at the end. John had taken a wrong turn and entered an unmapped passageway. John became stuck upside down in a narrow crevice. Rescue attempts were made but failed. After being stuck for more than 26 hours and becoming non-responsive, John Jones was declared dead from cardiac arrest. The cave has been sealed off, making it a memorial and his final resting place.